welcome to the Golf Ireland podcast with myself, Valerie Wheeler, and my co-host Stephen Murphy. Stephen, hello, how are you this week?
Great, thank you. Yeah, I said, you know what, you intro. People are sick of hearing me intro, Valerie. So let's hear your lovely voice and intro it that way. But yeah, no, I'm great. Thank you very much. How are you?
Good, yeah, flying it. Not a bother, not a bother. The last time we were chatting, you were chatting about your golf game and you were down in the dumps about it. Come here, what's happened since? There were a few tears the last day, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah, I was feeling sorry for myself. Yeah, I went to the range a lot since then, and I've made some progress. Let's just say that I'm keeping the ball on the planet now, which is it's nice. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Athenry, where I'm a member, but it's quite narrow. So if you can't drive the ball well, then you might as well just go home. So yeah, been better. Playing more now as well. Hopefully, actually going to play this one of the evenings as well, get out after work and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm excited for the next few weeks of golf. But I have a stag this weekend. My one of my good mates from back home is his stag is this weekend, and of course it's like giving the nicest weather of the year so far, and I won't be able to golf. So first world problems, Valerie, but we're getting there. But yeah, we made progress. And tell me about you. You're flat out running.
Yeah, before you we started my running, I must say what a nice weekend for a stag. Fair play to you. You're going to have an absolute ball of a time. Yeah, I'm running. I think this is my latest obsession, lads. I just feel like the days are long, I do an early breakfast show and I hate the fact of that. No, I do a lot the weekends, but I feel like I need to get out in the evenings and do something nice. And with the weather being fairly okay, I've decided to start the couch to 5K because I can't run. So this is the start of my journey. I'm on week 2. It's 3 runs a week and you kind of get a little schedule. And today now after the call, I'm going on my second run of the week, which they obviously get harder as the days go on and you have to run for longer. And I'm like at the side of the road here in Limerick. So I wear a hat so no one can see my big red head. But yeah, I'm kind of loving it. I'm loving the journey I'm on.
I was gonna say, yeah, are you enjoying it? How's the body feeling after it? Are you sore the days after?
Yeah, the body now, I feel like this is the first time ever that I felt a bit old. I'm like, oh my God, the body. It's the legs. I'm full roam in the evening to beat the band here. I'm constantly on the foam roller, but I don't know. I got new runners, so hopefully they'll help me. I just feel like when you don't run at all and you go from running a lot, maybe that's the pressure on the little legs that I have. But no, I'd say the more I get running, the more my body will get used to it, hopefully.
Yeah, it does. I don't do a lot of running obviously myself, but I did the Christmas 5K back home in Cavan. Basically, it was the St. Stephen's Day, which was a bad idea to begin with. But
Uh,
my brother paced me. My brother's fit as a fiddle. He's always running and stuff like that. So he basically dragged me along for it. But you do the one thing I've say you do feel great after. There's a lot of endorphins that come from all that sort of stuff. And once you're enjoying it, then great. And do you have a 5K date and set, or is it still too early for that?
Well, you're actually going to laugh. What I have, the date that I haven't set is the Dublin Marathon, Stephen.
Wait, whoa, you're catch 5K and then you want to do, I'm trying to do the maths, eight 5Ks back to back?
So I have, what have I got? I have a couple of months left
Oh, wow.
to try and run the Dublin Marathon. I've just said, look, come here, I've always kind of wanted to do something like only 1% of the population ends up running a marathon. And I thought, why not? Why
Well,
not?
fair play to you.
I know,
Well,
do
look,
you know what?
I'm,
This is the first time after saying it out loud, and I'm really scared after saying it now. I'm like, oh my God, what have
yeah,
I said? I've
now
said
you
it
have
now.
the accountability is there now. You've said it out loud.
Yeah.
That's
Here we go.
brilliant. Absolutely, go for it. Why not? What's
Yeah.
stopping you apart from obviously doing a lot of running? But you're already doing that, so brilliant. When is the Dublin Marathon?
End of October. So what have I now? I've June, July, August, September, October,
Five
five
months.
months.
5 months. Super doable.
Is it?
You're asking the wrong person. As
If there's
long as
anyone
I've,
listening, get in touch. Any runners? I know we've golfers listening, but any runners,
yeah,
lots of
absolutely.
encouragement I need. Yeah. So
That's
here we go.
brilliant. Well, we'll keep track of that progress over the upcoming months. Yeah. Well, let's talk a bit about the guests we had this week. I got to talk to, Tony O'Reilly. If anyone remembers a story back in 2011 of Tony O'Reilly basically was jailed for a gambling addiction. He was stealing money from his employer on puss. But I sat down and had a great discussion about basically his path to getting to that stage, gambling addiction, how it impacts your life. It's a very relevant story, I think, to a lot of people these days, and the ease of access to gambling. And now Tony does, travels the country giving talks and trying to help people get out of their gambling addiction. So a really interesting story, a bit different pace to what we're used to here, but a very, very important one. And if anyone's listening at home and has kind of someone they know who struggles or struggles himself, I think it's a must listen. But yeah, we'll throw to that conversation now with Tony. I am now delighted to be joined by Tony O'Reilly. Tony, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. I suppose, Tony, the story is gambler to gambling addiction counselor and gambling workshops and doing talks around schools for gambling. It's obviously a huge and important topic. But before we get stuck into the nitty gritty, Tony, can you give us, I suppose, a synopsis of the journey you've been on so far, maybe, and then we'll get stuck into the details.
No problem. Thanks a million for having me on today. I suppose the journey would have started with a £1 bet when I was 24, which in today's term is ancient, because when I'm doing school talks, a lot of younger people are gambling a lot earlier. And it was the quarterfinal of the World Cup between Holland and Argentina, and Bergkamp scored the famous World Cup goal, and we won a bet, myself and my friend. And it was my first ever experience of placing a bet, and the buzz and excitement I got was absolutely huge, something I'd never felt before. And my gambling stayed at an okay level for the next 5 years, and then I got a voucher for Paddy Power for Christmas off my girlfriend's brother, and to use the voucher you had to open up an online account, and that brought me into a totally different world. I was able to gamble from the comfort of my own bedroom and gamble on absolutely any sport around the world. And my gambling, just to shorten the story down, I suppose my gambling kind of went snowball. For 5 years was okay, but then afterwards I had a big win. And I always say my gambling addiction started with a win of €5,000 on a football bet. And that it snowballed very, very quickly into placing bigger bets to get the same buzz, and end up getting into loads of debt because of my gambling. And I needed a horse to win a race in the English Derby to pay for my wedding, and I kept getting worse and worse. The loans kept getting bigger and bigger, and I felt I couldn't tell anyone or share it with anyone because just the stigma and also the shame and guilt around it. So then it ended up that I started stealing from my employer to fuel the addiction in the latter stages of it. And I suppose over the space of a couple of years, I stole a total 1.75 million from my employer on post and gambling through Paddy Power, and ended up in huge bets on absolutely everything and anything around the world. I was always going to catch up with me, because when you're doing that kind of gambling and taking that kind of money, it's going to catch up. And I ended up, I suppose, being caught in the end. A surprise audit arrived one Wednesday. I ended up getting into my car and nearly speeding out of Gorey, where I was working as a branch manager at the time. I ended up in Belfast, still gambling, still trying to win the money back to try fix the situation. But ended up suicidal in a hotel bedroom, minutes away from taking my own life before my family found me. And I suppose from there I was arrested, processed, charged, and I was always going to receive a prison sentence, and rightly so, for what I'd done. And I ended up receiving a 4-year prison sentence, but one suspended for theft and falsifying accounts. And I suppose I ended up serving a prison sentence. And when I came out, I suppose before I went in, actually I had trained to become a counsellor and psychotherapist, having, I suppose, coming through my own treatment and seeing the benefit that gave me in dealing with this big problem that I had. And it wasn't just the gambling, it was the problem, it was the underlying issues. And when I got out of prison, I continued that journey and became a addiction counsellor and started working specifically with gambling addiction. And then while working with a couple of organizations, I started doing school talks, and that's what I do mainly now, along with the counselling. I've gone into 136 schools this year and seen over 12,000 students aged from 15, 16 upwards. And we are seeing a huge trend of gambling within those age cohort as well. That's a very quick synopsis of the whole thing.
No, it's fantastic. It's an incredibly heavy story. It's an incredibly important story as well with the modern world we live in, which we'll get into. But yeah, let's dig a bit deeper. That first hit, you kind of mentioned the rush. Is that what it was? It was just a dopamine hit. It was an immediate gratification. It wasn't even about the money necessarily, was it? It was just about the rush of gambling, I suppose.
Yeah, generally when I became addicted as much to that affirmation. So when I done the bet, I always felt I wasn't good enough or good at anything when I was growing up. So I suppose there was insecurities there, bullying in school, underlying issues. And when that bet went in, even at 24, when everyone was congratulating me, I got a huge sense of something other than the buzz of just the money as well. It was that affirmation, like everyone was saying, geez, how'd you pick out that bet? You must be really good at this. And I always say I became addicted as much to that affirmation as I did to the potential money that came with it. And generally when people develop a problem, it's usually an early big win, and that's maybe how it made them feel, or the money that came with it and what you could do with that money. And that creates this mindset that this is an easy way to make money, but also this is a way to make me feel better. And you want more and more of it. And then you put bigger bets on to get the same kind of impact.
Were you involved in like the culture of betting? So like, was your family into having the odd bet? Was your friend group at the time involved in having a bet, or was it just something you stumbled across yourself?
Neither. Friend group, definitely not. Like, I suppose the landscape of gambling was a lot different in 1998 when I placed my first bet. Nowadays, you can't escape gambling when it comes to sport, but it wasn't part of our experience of watching matches. We'd watch Soccer Saturday on Saturday just to see what teams around the teams we support were winning around for the league table. It wasn't in my family. There was no parent, auntie, uncle that was big into horse racing, or I'd never been at the races. I'd never, a lot of times you hear with people who've developed issues that they used to go to the race as a young person, or they, be part of the culture of the family. It was absolutely nothing. And it was just that one innocuous comment of a friend of mine sitting at the counter having a few pints. He said, I'm going down to place a bet on the match. And I said, sure, go down, out of interest to see what it is. And then a special on the board caught my attention, and I done it. And he even said, like, you're mad to do that bet. It was a £1 bet on Cliver to score first and Holland 2-1. And even he said, you're mad to do that bet. Like, it's the chance that happened are so slim. And I suppose the fact that I'd proved him wrong, but also I suppose it was a 45-1 winner. And it was a huge buzz because I picked this big bet out. And it didn't have to be a huge amount of money to get the buzz. It was just the fact that we won it. And I suppose how it happened as well, last minute goal, quarter-final, cracker of a goal. So it heightened to it, I suppose, to the excitement.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that view on gambling, and myself included sometimes, to bet on like a major, say it just kind of increases your interest of it. Obviously, once it's a healthy interest and now it doesn't escape, as you said, as it can. But the gambling obviously increased from there, but it didn't necessarily increase in terms of the bet amounts for the first couple of years, right? It was kind of a slow burn to get to the point that you got to.
Yeah, for 5 years it was normal gambling on soccer at the weekend. That's what I was interested in, was the football and the odd horse race here and there. But then when I opened up the online accounts, you were now at all these markets you could gamble on from the comfort of your own bedroom. And then also back then you had to lodge money on your online account using electronic means, by a debit card or credit card. So I suppose I had an MBNA credit card, and that became my lodgement method. I'm sure if any listeners buy anything on credit, it doesn't feel like real money. If you're gambling on credit, it definitely doesn't feel like real money. So the amounts I bet started to rise, and the amounts of time I spent started to rise. Time I spent gambling started to rise, and that had a huge impact on my gambling and how I gambled, I suppose.
Yeah, I think one of your big wins earlier on was actually on the Masters, wasn't it? It was 2011 Masters. Tell us about that tournament.
It would have been one of the big wins near the end, I suppose. It was the weekend where I went on a huge winning spree. And I suppose it's important to kind of to state that before I talk about figures, I suppose to state that it's relative to how it impacts a person's life. Like, as you said, a lot of people will gamble on golf or gamble on football and enjoy it. A lot of my friends gamble on golf and enjoy the experience because it's a good thing for them. They find it really good to gamble on it. It increases their interest in the tournament, especially if our beloved Rory or Shane aren't winning or aren't coming here. Like, even for me watching the PGA a couple of weeks ago when Shane Lowry was involved, I kind of like I'd watch it and I really got a buzz and excitement of it. But the one for the Masters, yeah, that was at the latter stages that weekend. I'd done huge bets. At this stage, I'd stolen nearly €900,000 from the post office. And that weekend, I'd done a series of bets. I kept on losing, winning, losing. But I went on a run on the Sunday, and that kind of ended up with me putting €20,000 on Charl Schwartzel to win the Masters at 3-1. And he birdied the last 3 holes, and I won €80,000. But I suppose I'd also lost €45,500 on Tiger Woods to win a match play situation against KJ Choi. And, so I really fancied Tiger to win it because I'd won on him in the previous couple of tournaments. I'd won money on him. But the one with Schwartzel was like the buzz watching that at that night time, winning that kind of money. And I won nearly €500,000 that weekend. But then I lost it all in 12 hours because I was addicted to gambling because I was trying to win the other money back.
You mentioned that you had an interest in soccer, and that's why you would bet in soccer. Did you were you aware of Charl Schwartzel at the time? Did you know his form coming into it? Like, did you do the research on that, or was it just
Not
you
a
like
clue.
the odds? Not a clue. Okay, wow.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. It could have been the odds. It could have been maybe I was probably watching the tournament. So I probably would have watched the last. I was probably sitting up gambling and other stuff, and I probably had the golf on in the background, and maybe something caught my eye with him because like I wouldn't even now I wouldn't know a whole lot about golfers. I just want to see either Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy, or Shane Lowry winning, and I suppose that's how I watch it. How I connect to the player, or maybe something within him I connected with, or was probably more likely was probably the price, or someone who was doing the commentating kind of might have mentioned that he'd done well on these 3 final holes in the previous couple of rounds, something. I'm sure that's something guided my decision because it was a big enough price, 3-1 at that stage, like coming into the last 3 holes.
Yeah, definitely. And it wasn't just mainstream sports though at the time that you were gambling on too as well. Like it was basically, I suppose, obscure sports too. Again, was it just chasing that thrill? It wasn't necessarily that you had an interest in any of these sports.
No, it's usually when you're chasing losses or chasing wins, it's the next available event. Now, that could be Azerbaijan basketball, Peruvian netball, Russian under 13 table tennis, Himalayan under 17 reserve soccer. Like I won money on Rosanna Davison the time she won Miss World for Ireland the time because I was gambling on the next available event. So if you're chasing wins or chasing losses, you're not waiting till the weekend till the Masters is on or the Open is on. You're gambling on tennis matches in the far end of the country or like a far end of the world. You're gambling on sports you don't even know anything about, and you're mainly looking at odds or looking for something to connect to that bet. So I was gambling on the next available event, whether that was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's usually a sign that you have an issue if you're gambling on stuff around the world that you haven't got a clue about. Like I was gambling on cricket the time the Ashes was on around, I don't know what year it was, but I remember I lost the bet because of the weather. I couldn't get my head around it because I didn't understand that the weather can play a part in the match being called off or given to certain. And I remember I couldn't get my head around this. And of course, you start chasing that money you've lost and that as well. So I gamble on sports I didn't have a clue about, and that's normally the case when someone's chasing losses.
And this might seem like a silly question. Are you enjoying it at the time? Are you getting enjoyment out of it, or are you just doing it because, well, obviously you're addicted?
There's moments where you get that buzz, but the joy and the excitement was well gone over at that stage. You know, like a lot of my early bets I enjoyed, a lot of the football bets I enjoyed, but in the latter stages, there's no excitement. It's always about trying to get back to zero, trying to get that money back to try fix the situation you're in. I think we can all accept that we can't drink our way out of a drink problem, but the gambler believes he's only the one bet away. I remember I was in the pub one day working, and an old man said to me, he said, "Son," he said, "if you ever do decide to ever place a bet," now this is before I gambled, he said, "if you ever have money on an event and you don't enjoy watching that event, then you've too much money on it." And I think I did not enjoy any of the events I watched. Now, of course, when Charl Schwartzel wins or there's a last minute goal, even if you have big money and you're going to get that buzz because it's kind of right, I'm nearly back, I'm back. But then you could be on the complete opposite a couple of minutes later when you're after losing a whole lot of money on something that you gambled straight away afterwards. So there are ups and downs, but the excitement is well gone out.
When did you actually start to become aware of the problem? At what stage, or were you oblivious to it for a long time, or just telling yourself so that you didn't have a problem?
I always say it was 6 weeks into treatment because I saw everything else as the problem. I saw, like, you know, the fact that the jockey fell at the last fence is the problem, or the fact that I couldn't get money, or the fact I was trying to hide the money I'd stolen. I didn't see the gambling as the problem. The gambling was the solution right up until I was in treatment. I probably still thought I was a bit unlucky. You know, looking back at the figures, 10.5 million turnover on the gambling accounts, stupid amount of money won and lost. I suppose it was 6 weeks of treatment when I kind of hit me, you know what, I need to look at this. You know, I would have went into treatment first and foremost to try to get away from the media kind of frenzy that happened when my story broke because the amounts of money involved. So I suppose it was only really then that I started to really look at it, and then that was when I started to come into real recovery. And luckily, ever since then, I've been in recovery.
And talk to me about the relationships and how this impacted that, because you're trying to obviously keep it secret. I said you're up late hours at night betting, and how did that impact the relationships with the people close to you?
It impacts every single thing. It impacts your work, your relationships. Like, you know, I was staying in the spare room, gambling 16, 17 hours a day. People will always describe how I became a shell of a person. Like, I lost that kind of light behind the eyes, I suppose. I lost that kind of happiness that was within. I was bloated with stress. I was comfort eating. I was getting sick every morning with stress. I wasn't engaging in family events or with friends. I was missing out on nights out, even with my ex-wife and my, you know, all friendships. It was just like I was there in body, but not in mind, is probably the best way of putting it. I was only afterwards people described as, oh, we knew there was something wrong, but we couldn't quite put our finger on it. And that's why I do what I do, to try create awareness, is to try, I suppose, create that awareness that it could be gambling, it could be something else other than, oh, you must be stressed because of work, or you must be stressed because of whatever. And no one knew. Like, I was able to hide it from everyone, and even the internal stress of trying to hide everything from everyone, including my employer, it meant that I wasn't myself at any stage. I turned into a different person. That's why, when Declan Lynch wrote the book, it was nearly like the Tony 10. My username was nearly like an alter ego. I became a different person because of my gambling. I became a horrible person, if I'm being totally honest.
And you were very successful in your work as well. You were very young when you got appointed postmaster. So it's, sometimes you feel like people turn to gambling because they don't sometimes have other successful, in their other areas in their life. But you clearly were doing very well in your job. But that didn't seem to matter. It was still, you were chasing the gambling.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, I'd say the addictive behaviors were there before I would have used materialistic stuff to help me cope with insecurities when I was younger. I used to have the best of stereos. I remember there was an electronic shop beside Scraggs, and I was their best customer. I used to get stuff on hire purchase and buy the best of stereos, and I was always paying back money. But money having nice things used to make me feel secure myself. So I suppose I would have left school after leaving cert. I would have dropped out of college. I would have worked in bars, clubs, and restaurants for 5 or 6 years. And then when I got into One Post, I suppose at 24, it was probably around the same time as my first bet, I wanted to change a career. I wanted to try not be working nights anymore. So while I was very probably unsuccessful in early stages of my career in working in the bars and clubs and restaurants, when I got into One Post, I suppose I had this new want to try achieve well, and I would have gone back to college. I would have worked up through the organization. I did become the youngest branch manager in the country when I became branch manager at Gorey Post Office, but the insecurities were always there, the imposter syndrome. I suppose when I got the job as well, I went from working on the counters, which would have been a very interactive and social thing, to working in an office on my own. So from the outside looking in, it looks like, geez, you got a great job and everything's brilliant. But in the inside, I suppose I probably always felt there was something lacking there. There was something not quite right in regards to how I perceive myself or how I connected with people. And that's when I struggle sometimes, even in recovery now, 13 years or 14 years on, when I feel that disconnect at times, it can lead back to old addictive behaviors. While there hasn't been any gambling, the old shopping comes back in as a way to cope, I used to use comfort eating as a good bit as well. So that kind of comes back in and out the odd time as well. So it's been quite a journey. Like, in career wise, it looked brilliant from the outside, but inside I was probably still feeling I'm not good enough. And I think that's an internal thing that was always there and probably still is there, if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah, yeah, you never know what people are going through. Talk to me about when you started to borrow money from On Post. You kind of mentioned that already, but when did that start to kick in? When did that first idea, I suppose, pop into your head that this is a way of fueling the gambling?
It's interesting to use the word borrowing money, because that's what that was my rationalization. Yeah, to say a fraud to happen, 3 elements have to be present: pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. I rationalized it as borrowing, but I was stealing. And I think it happened because I was huge in debt. I was about 45,000 euro in debt. I'd maxed out credit cards. I was just about keeping my head above water when it came to finances. My wife had no idea. She was giving me half the money for the mortgage, half the money for the loans that she didn't know about. And then I suppose we found out that she was going to become a mom, or she was pregnant. And I remember I was thinking, crap, this can't be happening, because she wasn't going to be getting maternity pay. So the pressure just came tenfold on me. And then I was sitting in the office one day and I said, geez, maybe I can borrow a bit of money. I can manipulate the coin bags to make them look full and, take the money, gamble it, and then I'll pay it back. You do rationalize it as borrowing, I'm going to pay it back. Where in fact, it's the total opposite. And then that can quickly snowball, because I've worked with clients where fraud has been present as well over the years. And they always talk about how quick it can snowball, because you're desperately trying to win back. So you're doing stupid bets and things you don't know about. And then you lose it and you go chasing losses. So the only way you can fix it is by taking more money to try gamble to win it back. So that quickly escalated to stealing notes and went from hundreds into thousands, into tens of thousands, into hundreds of thousands at the end. I think most of it happened over about a 16-month period. In the latter stages, I was stealing 75,000 euro a week, 15,000 euro a day, and gambling through Paddy Power, 2 Paddy Power offices, trying desperately to get this money back. But even looking back now, if I got the money back, I would have started the whole process again, because I was addicted to the gambling. So it was
Yeah, I know it's crazy. Yeah, I used the word borrowed there probably incorrectly.
Well,
So apologies for
I
that.
probably I use it a lot
Yeah,
as well because that's how I rationalized it.
yeah,
And you probably heard me on the podcast saying it a few times as well. I borrowed
exactly.
it.
Maybe that was it. Yeah.
But that's what we do. We rationalize that moment. This is what, and I was convinced I was just borrowing. I'll pay it back. Like,
Is that you mentioned? I'm presuming here, but I'm sure the lowest point of the journey was when you were in that hotel room and having suicidal thoughts. I suppose talk to me about that. I suppose those couple of days and how tough that was for you.
yeah, I suppose in the first couple of days when I inverted commas went on the run, I suppose you're waiting on news to break. It's just building. You're still gambling, trying to alleviate the stress and anxiety. You're waiting on something to come into the newspapers or on the RT News. And it was a very lonely place. I was like, to anyone looking from the outside in, I was someone who was off for a few days in Carrickfergus. But I was in a hotel room on my own, alone with my own thoughts, alone with very dark thoughts. And, you know, I Googled the word suicide a couple of weeks before that, and I had the means to carry out the plan. And I went into a very, very dark place. And then when I knew that I lost all my money online, and then I won money in a docket, couldn't cash that in, and the walls started to come around me. And I remember after I placed my last bet on a horse, the horse called Badea, and on the 2nd of July 2011, when I placed that, and then I started making contact with my family because news had broke in the national newspapers, and I was reading the article, and it said family and friends are looking from the Wicklow Mountains. I suppose I had one of those rare moments of clarity where I said I may make contact with my family. And I did, and they actually used Google Maps in the end to find me. There's a whole story behind that, but and they eventually, through kind of, you know, coming up to Belfast and then on into Carrickfergus, found me very distraught in a hotel room, probably moments away from taking my own life. They had to get the police force in Northern Ireland involved to come up to the room and check that I was still alive when they came in. So it was a horrible time. Like I done the documentary with Baz years ago on gambling in Ireland, and I remember we went back into the hotel room, and you can see me, I'm visibly kind of shaking going back into that room because it's a small little room number 6 in a hotel in Carrickfergus. And I'll never forget, like, it felt like that's where I was going to take my last breath. That's how bad it was. That's where the gambling had got to, because the guilt and shame, stigma, letting people down, knew exactly what I had to face, and the shame it would bring to everyone, and the stress and the disappointment. It just felt like I can't go on with this. And luckily, for some reason, I suppose a lot of it's to do with my daughter. I couldn't leave her with unanswered questions. I couldn't leave her with that kind of sense of why did this happen. So I think that kind of kept me going, as well as my family finding me. And luckily, I'm here to tell the story of how you can come out the far side of any problem and be a better person in the end because of it.
And that's important to highlight that you have come through it, and now the process of getting better and tackling that addiction, you're doing that constantly, and now you go around Ireland, you're doing workshops for gamblers, you're doing talks for schools. How important is that not only for the people you're telling that story to, but for your rehabilitation process as well? How important has that been for you?
I think working in the area has been very important because I suppose I get to journey with a lot of people on their journey of recovery. I get to kind of, in some way, try help and support them. I think with the education part is the bit I really enjoy, because it is about starting conversations. Like, I'm not anti-gambling in any shape or form, but I am anti-gambling harm. Like, the majority of people will enjoy a bet. The majority of people will, you know, enjoy a bet on the golf, will enjoy a bet on the football the weekend. It's just I can't do it anymore because it's something that I know if I do, I'll end up going back to it. But going to the schools, it is about starting conversations. So you're not kind of going saying gambling is this, gambling is that. You're saying, well, this is what can happen, and this is what maybe to look out for in yourself or your friends, and have those conversations. Because for me, gambling was a way to cope with underlying issues. And it's about trying to create awareness that, you know, you can have issues, you can have problems, but the most important thing is I know it's the old adage, the most important thing is to open up and talk about, which is something I felt I couldn't, or something I didn't learn to do when I was young. I know that mental health in Ireland is a lot different now than it was when I was growing up in school. Like, I'm 50 this week, so it's a lot different now, and schools are a lot different now. A lot more pressure in lots of ways, but we are talking about mental health a little bit more. And that's what it's about. And the most important thing, I suppose, is starting conversation. But the nicest thing that happens after talks is that when you get feedback that it's after starting conversations. I had a mom contact me a few weeks ago saying that her son is not a man of many words, but when he got back into the car following the talk, they had a full conversation around gambling and gambling addiction, and that kind of conversation continued on to the dinner table when they were all sitting around the table having their dinner. And that, I suppose that's what you're trying to do, is start conversations. And that's why I do podcasts. That's why I do. So I suppose some people will have heard a story before, and some people are probably sick of hearing me talking about it. But it is about trying to reach maybe someone who might be struggling, who listens to the podcast or who might hear the story.
Yeah, and that's a great place to wrap up, Tony. If someone is listening to this and they are thinking they may be struggling with some gambling, or there are maybe some potential issues, or someone they know might have a potential issue, what's the best course of action for them to take?
Is to reach out and talk to someone about it. And sometimes you might feel you can talk to a family member because they could be too close to it. But there's some great charities and great organizations out there at the moment. You have Gamblers Anonymous, you would have your local GP, you would have gamblingcare.ie. There's a lot of resources on that website that can kind of point you in direction to look for some help and support. A lot of it's low cost as well, are free. It have Extern Problem Gambling, where I would have worked with before, and Barry's still involved in that, and he's brilliant. And again, it's just about trying to open up and trying to just look for that help and support, because that's always the first step in recovery. And for me, the first step was going into Cumbria for treatment, and it's probably helped me in my journey to where I am today. Just reaching out and I suppose showing that vulnerability, or allowing yourself to show that vulnerability and ask for help, which is something I would never have done in addiction or in active addiction.
Well, Tony, an early happy birthday for you, first of all.
Much.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. And thank you for telling us your story.
Thanks very much for having me on, Stephen.
Okay, it is time for some news updates. We'll start with professional golf. It is the US Women's Open this week at Lancaster Country Club. We've Leon Maguire, Stephanie Meadow, and Áine Donegan in the field. Very, very exciting to have Áine in the field as well. And best of luck to Leon and Stephanie and Áine this week. On the PGA Tour, it is the RBC Canadian Open this week with Shane Lowry, Rory McIlroy, and Seamus Power all in the field. On the DP World Tour, it was a tied 67 finish for Conor Purcell at the Soudal Open last week in Belgium. This week it's the European Open in Germany with Tom McKibben in the field, and Tom McKibben looking to defend his title there actually from last year, so that's very exciting, so best of luck there. On the LET, it was a tied 4th finish for Lauren Walsh at the Amundi German Masters, a huge result there. Jumped 17 spots to 21st on the order of merit, so well done, Lauren. The Dormy Open is on this week in Sweden for both Olivia Mahaffey and Lauren Walsh, so best of luck. On the Challenge Tour, it was the Danish Golf Challenge last week with Gary Hurley, the best of the Irish, with a tied 66 finish. And it's actually an off week this week, the Challenge Tour, but next week it will be the Challenge to Cadiz, which is next week. On the Alps Tour, Alex Maguire was best of the Irish at the Lacano Alps Open with a tied 24th finish. This week then it is the Alps de Roquetas de Mar. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing all these, I probably am, but that is this week, starting on yesterday, started yesterday, I believe. So best of luck there to Alex. On the Clutch Pro Tour, Stuart Grehan with a tied 14th place finish was best of the Irish last week at Cumberwell Park. The Q Hotel Championship at Forest Pines this week with the final round today. So keep an eye out on social media for the results of that. We'll now flip it over to amateur news. The Ulster Men and Women's Amateur Stroke Play Championship had taken place in Clandeboy Golf Club. Adam Buchanan from Royal Portrush and Annabelle Wilson from Castle Rock were crowned champions. Annabelle was a comfortable winner, taking the title by 9 shots. Very, very impressive. Adam became men's champion following a 3-way playoff with a par on the first playoff hole enough to claim the championship. So great results there for Adam and Annabelle, and a great, I'm sure, a few days up at Clandeboy. The Brabazon Trophy as well. Hugh Foley was the best of the Irish in Hollandwell. He finished tied 10th on 5 under par. Some good form there for Hugh. And then finally, the East of Ireland Men's Amateur Open Championship gets underway in Baltray on Saturday, June 1st. With 132 players teeing it up on the County Loud course over the bank holiday weekend. A very exciting weekend of golf in Ireland, in amateur Ireland golf, and very, very excited for everybody taking part in that, and best of luck to all competing. That wraps up all the news around Golf Ireland this week. We appreciate you listening as always, and we will look forward to seeing you next week for another episode. We will talk to you then.